welcome to Queries, Proposals, and Publishing for Writers of Genre. I'm Jody Vinson. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the program director here at LitArts RI. We are a nonprofit serving writers in Rhode Island, and we're so excited about this event today. Thank you so much for being here. We are recording the event for those who couldn't make it, so just be aware of that during the question and answer session. And we might also take a few photos for social media. If you don't want to be in them, just let me know after the event. Thank you for being here. We're gathered here today on the ancestral homelands of the Narragansett Nation, who had their land stolen through settler colonial violence, and we recognize their continued presence as a sovereign nation and millennia-long steward of this land, as well as the historical tribal presence of the Nipmuc, Wampanoag, and Neantic peoples. We honor their stories and the vibrant contributions of Indigenous people who live, work, and create in Rhode Island today. So before we introduce our panel, I want to let you know that after this program, from 4 to 6 today in the center, we opened the center up to writers of color for our monthly coffee hour. That's happening today. You're welcome to stay for that. Today's panel wraps up our programming for 2024, but you can look ahead to more events from LitArts RI in the new year. We'll have a member mingle in January, an open mic every last Friday of the month, a winter showcase, and more coffee hours in the new year. We also have plenty of local writing groups. If you're looking for that accountability and support and community for your own writing, just sign up for our newsletter. You can follow us on social media to stay up to date. You can consider membership as a way to support our nonprofit, or purchase a co-working pass to enjoy the creative workspace that we have here. And if this is your first time, we're happy to show you around after the event. This event was made possible in part by a grant from the Dexter donation, and it's part of a series of events kind of celebrating and supporting writers taking the Novel Writing Month Challenge in November. Did anyone here happen to participate in that? All right, wow, okay. Yes, you do deserve a round of applause. So I'm sure today's conversation might be relevant for you. Also, anyone who's thinking about stepping into the world of publishing. We're focusing on genre writing, and we're excited that fantasy, romance, and contemporary fiction, romantasy, YA, all of these genres have been trending up in the publishing industry. But we also know that the path to publication can be hard and present various challenges. And so we just wanted to provide the support and knowledge for those of you heading down that road through these wonderful local authors. All three of our panelists today are Rhode Island authors with books that came out this year. I'm going to just introduce I'm going to introduce our moderator for today's panel, LitArts RI's program coordinator, Susanna Morse. When she's not here, Susanna writes and illustrates her own fantasy, poetry, and creative nonfiction, and has studied the work of Susan Cooper and other radical and feminist fantasists. She's going to introduce you to our panelists, ask some questions, and then we'll open up the conversation to your questions as well. So just save them for the end and we'll get to them. Thanks for your attention. Susanna.
Hi, thank you all so much for being here. We're just going to start out doing some quick bios and introductions, and then each of the local authors is going to explain just a little bit about their own publishing journey and process. Riz, you want to start?
Sure.
Okay.
Should I pick up for this one?
Yeah, I'll give you your bio and then.
Okay.
Yeah. So Riz M. Neilson is the author of young adult novels Deep in Providence and I'm Not Supposed to Be in the Dark. Her adult debut romance, A Love Like the Sun, published in June. She lives in Rhode Island, has 2 children, a cat, a dog, and bunnies named Casper the Ghost and Michael Myers.
Hi. Wait, is this on? Yeah? Everyone hear me? Okay. Yeah, I'm Riz. I feel like my bio says so much. I'm like, wait a minute, what do I say? So my publishing journey. I actually wrote fan fiction probably most of my life, fan fiction and poetry. And I didn't even, to be honest, and I feel like this is strange to say, but like a path in publishing, I didn't even consider it until college. And late in college, like I went to school for years not having any clue what I was gonna do. Wasted a ton of I finally settled on ultrasound technology at Rhode Island College, and then my guidance counselor was like, you need a couple more gen eds, like you need some like fun classes, like just throw some stuff in there. And I was like, oh, okay, so I'll just take creative writing because it's fun, right? Like I'm like, I'll just take creative writing, and I went to creative writing classes, and instantly I just knew, like I knew already that I was like doing the wrong thing with ultrasound technology. And I obviously, like I have kids, I'm a single mom, I'm also in school forever, so it's not like I was just gonna just throw it away, but I also gave the classes my all. Like every single story, like I poured myself into every story, and in those classes I had my first two classes, because I ended up taking a bunch. But in the first two classes, the ones that I was just required to take for elective, I took poetry and I took Introduction to Creative Writing Fiction. And I took those with Emily M. Danforth, who is the author. She's also a local author of The Miseducation of Cameron Post and Plain Bad Heroines. And then I took it with poet Carrie Shipers, who is an award-winning award-winning local poet. And they both, and they're friends, so what happened was they talked to each other about me. And I didn't know. Yeah, they talked to each other about me, and I didn't know, and it was a little weird because they were in two separate classes. I didn't even have them on like the same days, nothing. And all of a sudden they were like, so you have class with this other one. We gotta talk. And they talked to me. They both talked to me, and they said, you need to, or you don't need to, but you should consider this as a career path for yourself and take it seriously. And at that time, I was just writing fanfic. Like when I tell you, like it was so. My grammar is still terrible and everything, so it was just rough. But I think that obviously it was so beautiful. When someone sees something in you, you should like really hold on to that. And and then I ran with it. I literally went back to my guidance counselor was like, what? I was like, so I think I need to switch majors again, and to creative writing. And she was just like, and thank goodness that she was the coolest guidance counselor ever, because she was like, what? But she also was like, all right, you know what? Like, you can do it. Like that, this will be great. So she switched me, and she helped me along my journey. She was also great. And yeah, I think that my journey might look a little different than everyone else's. It's not traditional because it relied a lot on like school and being in like different programs in different communities with people who were also writing. But it just reminds me of this, right? It's like going to these events and doing these type of things. Like I set myself up where I was writing for like literary magazines, or like trying to get published in literary magazines, you know. And I entered contests. Like I entered a bunch of contests. I met people. I networked. So what ended up happening for me was that my journey is such a mess, because what I ended up doing was I didn't even write a full book. What I did was write 50 pages of a book, and I applied to MFA programs. If anyone knows what an MFA program is, it's a Master of Fine Arts, and for creative writing. And afterwards, you could also become like a teacher, a professor, or you know. So I thought that would be my path. I thought I needed something like that, because I was like, well, I need to make money for my kids, right? Like, so I need something really solid. And I did end up getting into creative writing programs. I got into two. But at that time, I couldn't go to either, because one of them was Missioner in Texas, and the other one was in Wisconsin, and I was going through a divorce, personal, but so it didn't end up working out. And then I basically had to pivot yet again and get my book done. And that connection through Emily M. Danforth, she's the one who got me my agent. So she didn't get it for me, but she sent pages to my agent and said, and the agent contacted me and said, if you get this book done, like I will read it. So my journey looks really different, but I do have some stuff to share in the future. I'm gonna pass it on because I can talk for like 900 hours. But yeah.
Vanessa. So, Vanessa Lillie is the USA Today best-selling author of Blood Sisters, a new series centered on the stories of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, which was a Target Book Club pick and GMA Book Club Buzz pick, as well as Best Mystery of the Year from the Washington Post, Amazon Editors, and Reader's Digest. Her other thrillers are Little Voices and For the Best, and she's the creator and co-author of the #1 Audible Charts bestseller and International Thriller Writers Award nominated Young Rich Widows, set in Providence, Rhode Island, where she lives, with the Audible original sequence Desperately Deadly Widows and print edition recently released. Originally from Miami, Oklahoma, she is a proud citizen of the Cherokee Nation. Vanessa wrote a weekly column for the Providence Journal about her experiences during the first year of the pandemic. She hosts an Instagram live show, Twas the Night Before Book Launch, where she chats with authors the night before their book is out in the world.
Thank you guys for having me. This is awesome. I could listen to people's publishing stories all day. I don't like talking, but I really could listen all day. So for me, I was in graduate school for not writing. I also am paying off loans, not related to my career. And I had a really nice boyfriend who I would actually end up marrying, so that was pretty good. I had a nice job, and that was pretty good. But I just had this deep unhappiness, and I got, I was doing life coaching, and I did these remember I did a book where you fill out what your dreams are to try to figure out what was going on, and I figured out it was because I was no longer creative. I had just somewhere along the way completely stopped. I don't know if it was school or what, and I actually was kind of doing this work, and I was in the airport going home to Oklahoma, and I saw this romance author, Lisa Klempnes. Anyway, she's famous. I just remember seeing the blue cover. Mine Till Midnight is the name of that book, and I saw that book, and I just had this gut punch of, oh my god, I want to do that. And I write thrillers, so that's not where I ended up. But it dawned on me, and sometimes creativity should be obvious, but it really often isn't, because the world is a lot. That I, was in marketing and PR, and that's cool, have a day job, but I was not honoring my creativity, and that was such a source of angst. I truly was so anxious because I wasn't being creative. So that was early aughts when I was I want to get on this path. I want to figure this out. So I joined Romance Writers of America, which has had a lot of problems lately and is not what it used to be. But man, back in the day, it was a fantastic organization that took craft so seriously, because people don't take genre seriously. Not people, but many people don't take it seriously. And so they did, and I sort of learned how to write from romance writers, and it was character arc, and it was a lot of different things. And they had contests where you could submit your first chapter, and so I just started getting feedback. I met other writer friends. I went to meetings. I saw Nora Roberts give a talk, which was incredible. She's such a badass. And just got into community, which I think is so important on this journey. And so flash forward 13 years, I was published. So overnight. But the kind of thing for me is along the way, so my first book, my debut I think is over there, Little Voices, that was published in 2019. And to get to that point, I had queried another book, and I think I probably got at least 150 no's, at least from agents. And that book is still kind of under my bed. And actually, it's been percolating a little bit lately, so it might come back to me. But never say die. But I kind of put that one away, and then with Little Voices, I had my son, and I figured out some things creatively, which I can get into, but I don't have to, that helped make things click, because your debut novel is a really, really hard sell. We can talk about market and things like that, but it is just a huge hill to climb for many reasons, including the marketplace and just the difficulty it takes to launch an author for a publisher, and it's a hard sell. So I wrote about something really personal, which I think can be a shortcut for debut authors, because it translates into just an understanding on the page that maybe you won't get if you're making everything up. I mean, you can have a fantasy with that beat, I'm not saying that, but something personal to you, I think really helps if you're a debut author, because it's a shortcut. So I figured that out after 10 years or whatever, And I love that publisher, and they're super cool, but like, it's just, my sales were not good. And so they're like, we're not doing this again. And then you sort of just pick yourself back up. And at that point, you know, I was like, after being published, which is like a dream, which is a really dangerous word to use in a business. You know, I was back at sort of square one where I didn't have a publisher anymore, and I didn't have an agent because I had to leave my agent for good reasons. And that was like really scary. But the thing about publishing is it isn't just about sort of being published, it's that journey. And there were some things I needed to recalibrate from a business perspective, I think. I had this very like, please love me dynamic with my publisher and my old agent. Like, because when you're a querying author, you're in such a lack mentality because you're just dying to get through the gate. You're just like, please someone tell me I'm good enough, which that is not a good mindset to have in any relationship or anything. But in publishing, you know, it can really eat you up. And so I kind of had to readjust. So when I went back out and started querying for agents again, it was not please, please, please tell me I'm good enough. It was here's what I am, here's what I offer, are you the right fit? Which is a completely different energy than how I originally went out. And then when we went out with the book that would become Little Voices, it ended up going to auction. It was just like a much better situation. And so energetically, I think there's some things in there that being a debut or being a querying author, being in those no trenches is really hard because publishing is a tough business. And when you're up, but it will come back around. So just that kind of endurance, and to me it's doing it for the journey and like the relationships and the community. That's kind of the best part, really. I mean, it's super fun to have a book out and to have a launch party and like all that stuff is really great, and to work with like a publishing team, that's really cool. But actually like having community and supporting each other, I think really day in, day out, celebrating other people's wins, that's sort of the best part of it.
Thanks so much, Vanessa. And we will now turn to Sophie. So Sophie Burnham, they, them, is the author of the Ex-Romana trilogy. The first novel, Sargassa, is available wherever books are sold, including right here. They have been a participating writer in and script doctor behind multiple studio, film, and television projects. Sophie lives with their dog on an island in Rhode Island, which is not an island.
Well, you guys all know that, but it's a really fun fact to bust out, you know, for non-Rhode Islanders. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
It's hard to tell back here.
Yeah.
I could also listen to other writers talk about their journey to publication all day, because of the three of us, I'm kind of the greenest, and I think I still have a little bit of a imposter syndrome going on, especially because I sort of side-doored my way in. But the more you listen to people, the more you realize there's actually, as much as it might seem like there is a straightforward way you are supposed to do this if you're trying to be traditionally published, everyone has such a different journey, but there are such overlaps that you can still be in community with people and still, you know, give each other really wonderful advice. So I don't come from a creative writing educational background. That's not what I went to college for. I grew up writing short stories, a lot of fan fiction, and I actually, we can get into this later, I have a theory about why so much contemporary literature is so exciting, kind of stemming from a lot of people having their background in fan fiction. We'll get into that later. But yeah, so I went to drama school. I got my BFA in acting, my Bachelor of Fine Arts, so I was at a drama conservatory. And while I was there, I was strictly doing my acting training, but I also was able to sort of finagle these concentrations in playwriting and directing. And the more I got into those two, the more those three disciplines all started to really inform each other. So that was kind of my training ground in terms of understanding narrative. And when I graduated, I ended up going to LA to do the, you know, working actor thing, and somehow ended up as a screenwriter. I self-taught. I just read a lot of scripts, a lot of really bad ones, which were probably more helpful than reading the good ones, because I saw what did and didn't work. And when you're a screenwriter, what you have to do is have a lot of samples, so that samples in the genre genres you're interested in working in, so that when you get a staffing meeting for a TV show, let's say it's Star Wars, you can pull out your, science fiction hour drama that's comparable to the show that you're going into, but not, for the show that you're going into, because that show doesn't exist. It just proves, is proof that you are genre savvy, that you know how to do this. So I was writing a bunch of those, and then I wrote this one called Sargasso. That was, it was a 60-page, 60-minute pilot episode spec script, and it was supposed to just live in my portfolio for, when I got a fantasy or sci-fi staffing meeting. But I wrote it, and it just sort of stayed with me. And I kept thinking about it, and I was like, I would really love to actually see this be, a real show. So I started sending it to friends of mine who were in TV development, not because I thought there was any chance in hell of me actually getting it made. I was nobody, no one knew who I was, but just to see, what they thought. And across the board, I heard back, creatively, this is fantastic, but it's really hard, if not impossible, to get a TV exec to greenlight something that is sci-fi fantasy that's not based on pre-existing intellectual property. Which is just like a risk aversion thing, because those kinds of shows tend to cost more. So even though it's not really like a sure thing, I think a lot of execs see, oh, this is pre-existing IP, and therefore think they already have fans, we already have a built-in audience, like this is gonna pay itself off. Not true most of the time, but that's just the way it is. Like, people in Hollywood are cowards, that's just across the board.
They're not much braver in publishing, so.
Yeah, they're actually significantly braver in publishing than Hollywood, which just tells you how bad Hollywood is. Yeah, it's wild. I said that to my agent, she was like, I don't believe that. I was like, yeah, it's because you haven't worked in TV development, yeah. Anyway, so then the pandemic hit, and I had a lot of time on my hands, and I was like, okay, well, I'll just reverse engineer this into my own IP. I'll turn it into a novel. How hard could it be? Really hard. I wrote it and basically realized, oh, I just wrote a season of TV in prose. That's not a novel. Yeah. So that was my first draft, and then I kind of had to teach myself how to write a novel from there. So yeah, the interesting thing is that I really knew nothing about publishing. I kind of stumbled my way through as I figured this out. I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot. But once I had something, I really leaned on my friends who either were in the querying trenches or were published to figure out what I wanted to do, and I learned, okay, you can do traditional publishing or you can do self-publishing, which are both perfectly valid. There's two completely different careers. I'm lazy, so I didn't want to do self-publishing, so that's 5 full-time jobs in one. And it also kind of didn't matter to me at the time, it didn't really matter to me what the end result of this book, in terms of the success, looked like, because I just wanted the IP to exist. But that actually started to change at a certain point in the process. I started to really fall in love with this book I was writing, and fall in love with it so much more than any film or TV or screenplay I had been working on. And I started to really fall in love with just the process of writing novels. So I was in the querying trenches, and as far as I knew at that time, you could either self-publish or get an agent and do a big, publisher. I didn't know that you could query directly to small presses and micro presses. And then I did one of the Twitter pitch competitions, which for those of you who don't know, back when Twitter was functional, there were these really great things where people could basically do these micro pitches of their manuscript that they have ready to go, and all these agents and all these small presses would be trolling the hashtag, looking for things that were interesting, and if they were interested in you querying them, they would like the tweet. So I was doing that, and I got a couple likes from agents. Interestingly, some agents who had already passed on my actual query. And I also got one from a small press. And that's the first time I realized, oh, I could just directly query a small press. This is cool. So I queried those people. especially because at that point I had been starting to wonder if I needed to put this project in my back pocket, but I was so in love with writing books at that point that I was like, ooh, okay, what's the next one that I'm going to query with, and then I'll come back to this when I'm a little bit more seasoned. So suddenly the idea of, oh, this could actually go out, but even if it's with a small press, was really exciting. So I decided to take them up on that, but I didn't know how to navigate the contract. So I started asking around for people's advice about what's it called? Lawyers to look at it, which eventually led me to like a friend of a friend of a friend who was an agent. And essentially her response was, listen, I don't want you to think I'm swooping in because you have a deal, but I've read your pages, I've seen your deal. Like, if you're comfortable with it, I can represent you and do this. So that's how I got my agent, who I'm still with, who I absolutely adore. The very long story short of what happened next is that 2 months before this book was supposed to come out in 2022, small press disappeared off the face of the earth. And we will talk about that because that is not unusual. I was very traumatized for like a year. But yeah, so, and it turned out it wasn't a scam, it was just badly run. But the good news is because my agent had never actually taken my book out on sub, we were able to get the rights reverted back to me. But because she had never taken it out on sub, she said, there is no reason we can't, shoot for the moon, go to like Penguin Random House, Hachette, like all of, the big guns. And that's how I landed with my publisher and ended up with like a much, much better deal with a much wider distribution. The deal was for all 3 books in the trilogy, not just the first one. So I don't really believe that everything happens for a reason, but it definitely, happened well.
Everything happens for a reason.
I think looking back on it, I'm very happy that what happened. But yeah, so that's my journey, and this came out in October, so I'm very new to this.
Congratulations.
Thanks. Yes, congratulations to all of you. I'm so happy to have you here. So I'm going to open up questions. I know each of you had a different journey to getting the book published, but all of you had to sell it in some way. And I'm wondering, as writers of genre specifically, when you have sort of like formulas that genres typically follow and conventions, like how do you set your book apart? Like what are you focusing on when you're trying to query and pitch your book?
The quick one for me is just like, I sort of said this, but make it as personal. I mean, I don't mean like your trauma, but like marketing likes, which matters because you have to say yes to your editor, likes to have a story behind the book. So it's like, I wrote this in Providence. I live in Providence. I wrote this about being a new mom. I am a new mom. I wrote this about being from Oklahoma. I'm from Oklahoma. Like, I know it seems silly, but it is to the end, or even like in a fantasy, like what is personal and particularly why you, which is in screenwriting to be like, why are you the person to tell this story? Because as they're selling it, because your editor could love it, but that's cool, but they have to sell it to the marketing team and the sales team and probably even a couple layers up. And so part of the sales for them is why you're the one to tell the story. And so not that you have to change your story, but just sort of think of it from their perspective of kind of selling it and why you have to be the one to tell it.
Just to jump off of that, because, and you said like, not just your trauma, but me, I'm like, yeah, my trauma. My trauma. Deep in Providence was my first book, my young adult novel, and I definitely made it, it's very personal to me. Like some of the stuff in the novel like has happened in real life. I got permission from some of my friends. It's roughly based on like growing up in Providence and like having a friend that, died, and me and my friends used to do like witchcraft together. So the book is about these 3 girls trying to bring their 4th friend back from the dead. So very, very personal. But you see, like it's a fantasy book, but because it had like those very personal layers and those connections to Providence, to place, setting is very important. Like I don't think setting is not very important in every novel, and nor does it have to be. But it's very important in like my novels, and I think like it's always every single time I get like any kind of interest from publishers or agents or like some agents like try to poach you like a little bit and stuff like that. Like it's always like they always mention like Providence, home, like they always mention setting. So I think like making it as personal as possible for especially for that first book. Like eventually I just want to write. I mean, I just feel like that's the thing too. Sometimes you just some writers say that they don't self-insert at all, which this is called self-inserting into your novel. And some writers say that they don't do that. That's never gonna be me. I'm always gonna self-insert. I'm just like the well will always be full because I have the craziest stories ever. So like I'll always have stories to tell. But I do think like if you use any of that and there's ways that you can like twist it to make it more entertaining or whatever. It's such a sell. It's so like important to be able to do that. I also wanted to say, what was your original question? Because I have like I jumped off of hers, but
The original question was just how do you, like, what sets your manuscript apart?
okay, that's what I was gonna say. So my books, this is both a bad thing and a good thing. It's a bad thing after the sell. So the good part is that my books actually they're genre, but they bend genre a lot, like they cross genre. So if you read one of my books and someone calls it like a fantasy or a romance or something, you might have questions or you might think like, no, actually that's something else. Like my books don't ever fit perfectly into any of the boxes or any of the spaces. There's so much, right? Like Deep in Providence is like almost 500 pages and it's like it has like some, thriller, some paranormal, it has romance, so it's like it's all over the place. And I think that it's all of the books that I have sold so far, that has been a sell to the publisher. Like they're like, this is so different. Like it's fresh, right? It's so different. I don't feel like I'm reading the same thing. Like again, like that's what I hear. The problem is the afterwards in the market, which I guess I can talk about in another like question. But the problem is afterwards. So it's both like a blessing and a curse to write like in this way where you cross genres, because afterwards the publishing team doesn't know how to market you, right? Because they're kind of like, well, we don't know where you fit. Like we have these pre-existing ways and these boxes of putting like books out into the world and this system that we don't know exactly where your book fits in. But I still think like, especially for some of us, I am BIPOC. I'm like chronically ill. Like for some of us, we really need something that sets our books apart and makes them different. And like we need to be able to like hold on. Like I've been trying to like not write to the market and instead hold on to those pieces of myself so that I can keep on like standing out amongst a crowd that I like normally we're not as accepted in, right? So yeah, that's very important.
Yeah, that point about not writing to the market I think is huge because I think that I got a piece of writing advice from my playwriting teacher when I was in college that has like lived in just the back of my brain ever since. Is that the more specific something is, the less cliche it becomes, which feels counterintuitive, but it's like the more specific you get, whether it's about something personal or about this world you're creating, the more universally people can like understand it. And I think that also comes into that idea of writing something personal. I think that even if it's not, this is my book is set in an alternate universe where the Roman Empire never collapsed and instead colonized North America. That's not very personal, but there's so much of me in this book. There's so much of the way that I think. There's so much of the way that I do see the world. Like it's commentary on very real things. And it's a book that only I could have written. And I think that that is really, really exciting for publishers to read something that, they're like, this is something different. This is something that I haven't seen variations of a million times. And definitely there is an issue that then comes with marketing. Like people have not known where to put my book. I've seen it in fantasy, which it emphatically is not. But then they don't know, is it, science fiction? There's no space lasers going on. It's alternate history, but I don't feel like I'm gonna put it next to, Margaret Atwood because that feels literary. And it's just getting to the point where enough people have read it and really resonated with it that I'm starting to see murmurs online of like, just read this book. Don't go into it blind. It'll be better for it, which is great, but also not really a marketing strategy. But I think that it again gets to the core of that thing of like, this is a very unique book. So I think that it's just about sticking to your guns and knowing that you're the only one that could write this.
Can I just add the important part about sticking to your guns is that if you want to get into traditional publishing, it's almost more important that you actually can get into traditional publishing than it is the after effect of marketing. Like, marketing is sad, and I have had some sad book sales, and I have my team has been disappointed. Like, there's been things, and it has caused like all kinds of issues, imposter syndrome, like after the fact. But the point is that if you want to break in, like, you have to find a way to break in. It is so hard. Like, it is not like I'm not saying like it's not impossible. That's the point. Like, we're up here, right? And we know so many people. Actually, Rhode Island's we're small, but we're getting a really good like base of like authors here, which is amazing. So it's not impossible, but it is tough. There are so many writers in the world and so many people wanting to do this. There are so many books. So it's really important to stick to your guns and like be as different as possible. And like Sophie said, like, if you could, even if you're creating a world that feels so far from the world that you know now, like, just put yourself into it in some way and like they'll see that. So yeah, just had to add that.
I thought of one thing, like, it is such a hard business, but there are some things you can do that make you jump ahead. Part of what we were talking about is the debut thing, especially, is like putting yourself in it, putting your own story in it, being distinctive. And then some things are like really taking time to write a great query letter, not making it a 15-paragraph synopsis, like really taking seriously the sales side of things, because that is what your agent first, right? So just like from a thought process perspective, an agent is looking for a book that they love and can sell. And the and can sell matters much, much more than the love, actually. They might even just like it, but they can sell it. And they see in you the ability to write probably many more books. So from their perspective, when they get in their inbox a query letter, they want to see that you have read a lot in your genre, you like know your comps. They want to see that you're punchy, that in my opinion your query letter should almost read like the back of a book a little bit. Like it's a selling tool, because basically they're going to take your query letter and they're going to change a couple words and they're going to send it to an editor. Like they want that work done for them. They're selling you. And the editor is going to take that letter from your agent and they're going to change a couple words and they're going to send it to the sales team and to their boss and to the marketing department. So hopefully. So like, you are the first wave, but in some ways you set the tone. And so you need to set that tone as selling, which I know is contrary to creativity and artistry, but I'm just sort of saying, like, if that's the game you want to play, that's, the game you want to play. And you can also go to a bookstore, hopefully a local independent one, like Hartley, and just read the backs of books. I mean, that's it, it really is. And so that will make you truly, I remember when I was querying, especially their agents, I would go to so many agent talks, and they were just like, if you just do a great query letter, you're better than like 90% of what we get in our inbox, And then on top of that, you've obviously worked your ass off on this book, and you've revised it a million times, and there's like not a word you could change because it's so damn good. And so when it lands in their inbox, and you're like really thinking about the first 10 pages, because they're reading for no, So you're gonna just grab them by whatever genre you're in, and they're not gonna be able to stop turning those pages. They're gonna love your characters, like all those things, right? You're ahead of 90% of the 10% that was left. Like it is a hard business, but it's also a business full of people who don't take the time to do the things that they need to do to set themselves apart. So just the fact that you're even here probably puts you ahead of 80%, truly. I mean, the stuff agents get is, including what I used to probably send to them. But yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't query, but like we just know so many stories, right? And then even just talking to my agent, they'll get like, my agent, she always has to close the queries because she has so many of us. But whenever she opens them up, she automatically closes them again because it's so overwhelming. Like, she gets like hundreds of queries like at a time, right? So if you think about like, you have to stand out like right? Like you have to be able to grip them. I agree, the query letter. I also wanted to add something that I have learned, because I did some screenwriting too, and I like, wow, the Hollywood industry. Like if it was rough on this side and not on that side, I was like crying and stuff. Like I was like, I can't. One thing that I have learned, and like something that I can say now, is that I have learned to make sure that before I show anyone a book, I can give it an elevator pitch. I think that on top of a query, you should be able to have an elevator pitch, and I also think that you should include it in your query somehow. Basically, what an elevator pitch is like 1 to 2 lines, or even it can be up to like 4 lines if you want to, but like the shorter the better of like describing your book, like the hook
if you were
of your
stuck
book.
in an elevator, or if you were taking an elevator with someone who could potentially do something for you, how would you pitch your book in that time that you have with them in the elevator?
Exactly, that's what it is. So it's like very fast, very, and that has to grip them, right? Like that's the automatic, that like getting you through the query is one thing, but if you can't even like, I'm not even saying you have to, because I think that a lot of people can't elevator pitch their books. So I'm not saying that you have to, but I'm saying that it can give you a leg up. Like my agent looks for that. She looks for people that can pitch their book in 1 or 2 lines, because she is going to be talking to people like that, right? So yeah, and then it's a lot less work on them, because a lot of the times agents also have to be editors, right? They'll get our books and then they have to like edit it with us, and if we don't know our books, they're like, that's a lot of work, right? So we should know our books. So
Can I
yeah.
ask you that?
I actually think that obviously having a really tight synopsis in your query letter is super important, but it actually is a really, really telling thing. If you're trying to do it, you just can't figure out how to succinctly describe your book. It's a good indicator that you actually need to go back and work on your book again, because maybe it's not finished. Maybe you don't really know what it is yet. So it's like they can actually help each other out. And then I just wanted to add, you'll see in the handout, I added my query letter that I had put out in the trenches, and it's annotated with a lot of notes about how, I don't know, there's a lot of don't do this in there, but essentially that is to help you from having your query deleted because you've made like a stupid mistake that has nothing to do with the actual book. And like Russ was saying, these agents have hundreds and hundreds of queries to get through, and that is on top of their actual job. They're reading these queries in their spare time. So they're reading for no, because they don't have the time to take on every single person. Obviously they want something to be good, but there's not much forgiveness for, I don't know, sloppiness, or, people who don't know what their project is, people who don't know what they have on their hands. Because it also, not only does it make their job harder to read through, but it is an indicator that the book's not ready yet.
I'm gonna maybe hop in and just point.
We'll just keep talking.
Just point out that the handout is full of resources. So if some of this is not making sense to you and you're just starting out, like some of these websites are great places to start. Like, how do I write a query letter? What is this process? The manuscript wish list, where agents are posting what they're interested in reading. Like, there are more resources there, and also each one of these wonderful authors has given us their actual sample query or pitch letters. So that's an example of something that actually worked. And thank you so much for doing that. Awesome, awesome resource. Vanessa, you said you left a book behind. Multiple. Do any of you have advice on when to stop querying? Like, how do you know it's time to take a break, or how many should you be thinking about sending out in the first place?
This is gonna sound a little out there, but I think if you queried like 200 agents, like just set it aside. It doesn't have to be forever. I mean, I feel like I hear a lot of people who get their agent are 150 to 200. So, but I feel, and if the feedback you're getting, if some blessed agent gives you feedback that's like actual, not a form letter, that probably means you're getting closer. So like there's indicators, but if you've sent out like 100 queries and you've gotten, nothing, that probably means either your query letter is not working, or your first 10 pages or whatever you're sending out aren't working, and if those aren't working, probably other stuff isn't working. If you're getting a bunch of, like it's sort of a, if you're getting a bunch of pull requests, right, that means that your opening pages are working, and I mean, I would keep pushing because a full shows that you've got progress, and it might just be you need to really find the right agent, because it is the needle in the haystack thing. So just like keep, for me, I think I would kind of keep going if I was getting a lot of pull requests because it's close, but if you get through them and everyone is giving you reasons they should, I don't know, these days, maybe if you send a full out, you don't always get a good response, but it used to be, you would at least get, this character didn't work for me, or, and you can get contradictory information too, but you're getting data, it's just, it's not a, it's sort of a numbers game, but then also like what feedback are you getting, and do you need to like step aside for a little bit and do the revision, or do you actually need to set it aside and maybe start on something else? It's a hard call to make, but if you sort of feel like you've run through most of your agents and you don't know where to go, like just, it might be time to sort of set aside. It's hard, I mean, listen, I've gotten a million no's and it sucks.
I've never been in the position of having to stop querying a book, or I did because I got an offer, but my really strong suggestion would be to, know all of the agents that you want to query, whether it's like 200, 300. What I did that I actually found extremely helpful is I only queried 20 at a time. I didn't, blast it out to my whole list of like 200 or whatever, because that way, as I started to get responses, if all 20, it's been so long since this happened that I don't remember specifically how it worked out, but like, as I started to get responses from people, and I did get, several full requests like eventually, but at the beginning I could start to tweak my query. If it wasn't working, that meant that I hadn't sent out a query that didn't work to all 200 and below my chances, because you can't query the same agent with the same thing twice, unless they ask. A lot of times on fulls, they'll ask you to review and to revise it and come back. But like for that first one, if they say no, that's a no. You can query them again with another project, but not with that one. So yeah, taking your time and being able to tweak it as you go is really, really valuable. I had something else to say, but I've completely forgotten what it was.
I don't have a specific for this, but I did want to say like about I don't know if this relates at all. I just wanted to add on to something that Vanessa said earlier, where I feel like sometimes the book is. I just wanted to say just this one part. You know how you said, what did you say? It's never dead. What was the quote you used?
Maybe I don't know. But maybe later.
But
you can, it's never dead.
Yeah. I feel like the book is just not for right now, maybe.
Yeah.
Right? Because one of the things is that like I said that thing about like playing to the market, but you kind of have to in certain ways. So like publishing is tricky, right? You have to in certain ways, and sometimes like it's just not right for the market right now, or not right for the agents right now. Like they're looking for certain things in the genre. They're looking for so a book is sometimes not for right now. And the one thing I will say is I have stopped put away a ton of manuscripts in the time since I've been published that I have just been like, this is not for right now. Like I know this is not the book, and I think it's important to be able to pivot. Like pivoting in this industry is like so important. So if you have that, like not that you can get knocked down, but you have to get back up and like pivot. And I think that that's so important with this part. I didn't query, but at the same time, I could imagine if I was in it and I was getting like rejection after rejection, like feeling that defeat. Like some people feel really defeated and then they just stop. And then there are people I know that like query like 400, like up to like, and then they'll finally pivot. Or some people pivot at like 150, but you have to be able to like pivot eventually and like start writing something else. Because in the between time, like we could be writing books, right? I wrote one of my books during NaNoWriMo, A Love Like the Sun, and I love my romance book was written during NaNoWriMo, and like obviously that's not possible like all the time. I don't think I'd ever be able to write another book in a month. I don't want to say never. I hope so. But I will say like I think that some people don't want to pivot, and I think it's like a mindset. You have to be able to pivot, books you can write while you're waiting on those rejections, you know? So, yeah, I don't know.
I remembered what I was gonna say. But before I say what I was gonna say, I completely agree with that. You know, just because something isn't right doesn't mean it's going to be wrong forever. It could just not be right for right now. In the weird, like almost year between losing my first publisher and getting my new one, it was about 11 months, and I wrote a duology secretly because I was in pain and traumatized. I didn't even tell my agent. And then I told her about it about this time last year, and she was like, ooh, that's gonna be a really hard sell because of like this genre, like it's kind of in what we would think of as like new adult, but the market thinks of that as erotica, and that's not what this is. You know, all of these reasons why no. And she said, you know what, just, we'll talk about it later. You have 3 books to write. I was like, yeah, that's real. And then she came back from Frankfurt, which is the big, you know, international book fair, in October, because she's also the international rights person for the entire agency. And she came back and she called me and said, hey, do you still have those manuscripts? Because I think the winds are changing. I think that people are accepting NA as a legitimate, you know, age group, or starting to anyway. I think that the genre that it's in no longer has certain implications it used to have, and also all, like X, Y, and Z, that hadn't been a problem, but X, Y, and Z about the thing are particularly hot right now. So she was like, dust it off. So something that had been I don't know, or a no a year ago was a please get this in shape so I can sell it now, like 12 months later. But yeah, the thing that I was gonna say is I know that Riss wasn't in the query trenches, but it's been a while since we were, and I know I was only in the query trenches 4 years ago. That is a while in terms of industry knowledge. So everything, you know, that we tell you is valuable, but I think that it is also extremely valuable to find community that is going through the same thing, so that you can, you know, have the benefit of community, as is a good thing to have in any situation, but also start to understand what some of the new industry norms are, but also a warning to not, you know, get bogged down by other people's cynicism, because I think that that's really easy to do, especially by people who have been in the trenches for a really long time and are really disheartened.
So we're going to open it up to questions from the audience soon. I just wanted to maybe end with a discussion about all of the challenges, like the industry challenges, and I think leaning into community is so important. And one thing that's just been on my mind is how can we help each other work around these barriers, work through the barriers, like what kind of conversation is helpful? Like if any of you have any thoughts, having been there, on what the actual challenges were and how as a community we can help one another through them.
I think the big thing that I particularly wanted to talk about for this panel is that there are a lot of bad actors out there. There are a lot of scammers. There are a lot of people who are just, you know, either trying to make a quick buck because they are, you know, a vanity press masquerading as, you know, a small press, or, you know, just, anyway, my point being, that's one of the really important reasons to have community, or even just to, there's a couple links on the handout. There's this one thing called Writer Beware, which is a really, really helpful resource about, you know, pitfalls and scammers and things like that, and that is very much community oriented, like people sending in tips, or people, you know, the people at Writer Beware saying, hey, we're looking for information about this thing, has anyone had experience, and people kind of coming out of the woodwork saying like, yep, like here's my experience. So I think that finding those kinds of spaces can be extremely helpful in, you know, navigating this kind of sticky environment.
Like Query Tracker, I mean, no agent's better than a bad agent. People say that, but it's really true. You know, something to always look at is how much are they publishing, like selling? What are they selling? Because their job is to sell. So you want to make sure that they're selling in your genre, that you like the books that they're putting out, that they're selling to publishers that you would want to be involved with. Like there's, in the agent agents out there who will scoop up your book because they think they can make a quick buck and they have no vision for your long-term career. And then when it doesn't sell, they drop you, and then you're emotionally wrecked for a year. I mean, that just really happens a lot. And so you just have to be really careful and make sure that you talk to their other clients, that you see, again, you can do Publishers Marketplace, or look at their client lists and just see that they really are selling and that they do know what they're talking about, because it is an industry with creative people, and we're vulnerable because we put our heart into it, and unfortunately vulnerability draws bad actors easily. There's a lot of great ones, but and it can also just be they're not the right fit. But if you get a yes, and I'm not saying I could have made any different decision than I did, but there were things I wish I had done differently looking back. And I know how hard it is to do those things because you're just desperate for a yes. You want to be through the gate, but you do still have to be really vigilant and make sure that the person who's going to take you through has your best intentions and career, long-term career really, at heart.
I think where I can add to this is just by saying it really is important because we are just trying to get that yes so bad. And I think that in the beginning, the power dynamic looks so skewed in their favor. They are gonna grant your whole dream in your life, and but at the end of the day, when you realize that they essentially work for you in the end of the day. So putting that into perspective, an author, I'm not gonna say who it is, told me that way back, you have to come in, it's kind of like the perception game. You have to come into it knowing yeah, of course you want the yes, right? But also, and it's hard, it's hard to break in, so it's very complicated, but also they need to, at the end of the day, I call it a partnership, at least with my agent, but essentially, when she told me she works for you, or they work for you, and it's very important to know that you're the talent in this situation, right? So sometimes it's skewed and you just want to be thankful for whatever you get, but the horror stories I have heard from friends who never hear from their agents ever, their agents, they only hear from their agents only in sale time, or if a contract, something's happening, whatever, to not, I feel like that is, I feel not pick your agent, because you almost can't do that, but I do feel it really is the fitting game, because some people are okay with never talking to their agent. I personally cannot ever do that because I am emotional wreck, and I want to be able to talk to my agent. I also have extreme anxiety, so I'm always hey, and me and my agent have such a close relationship, and I'm so thankful for that, and that choice of not, I got some I ended up getting some other offers later of kind of poaching situations, and I was I just can't, because the horror stories that I hear going out there, for me that's a horror story. From other people, they might be I never want to talk to my agent, right? I don't want to just sell my book and I don't want to speak to you. Me, it's I talk to my agent about my next book, steps, what the future look like. I talk to them about working with editors who have not understood my books, or problems I've had with publishers, getting dropped, after my first two books. And I feel without having that person in your corner, that is like Vanessa said, setting you up for a career and a relationship with them and a publisher. It's really important, because also you never know what can happen with your publisher. On top of the small press thing, stuff you might lose your editor mid Deep in Providence, for example. I went in with this editor that I absolutely adored. I love, I don't know if anyone's ever heard of Children of Blood and Bone, but it was one of my favorite books ever, and I couldn't believe the editor offered on the book. So instantly, I was I need that editor. I need and she was great while I had her. And then what happened was, and we had such a great plan for release. I was a debut author. Debut books are so important, right? And what happened was she moved. She just jumped ship. Literally I want to say 6 months before publication or 5 months before publication, and they just gave me someone random. They gave me an assistant editor that worked under her that read my book, and our whole plan fell apart. The marketing plan, everything fell apart. Everything was, and if I didn't have my agent at that time, I don't know what I would have did. So yeah, I think that settling for an agent just because you want to like go in and get in the door is like sometimes also not good. I also have heard horror stories about contracts with agents too. Definitely look at your contracts because you should be able to have a situation. I would say the ones that I've heard that are fair is between like 30 to 60 days notice where you give your agent if you need to drop your agent for any reason, right? But there are stories that I've heard of people that have contracts with their agents for like 6 months or like some kind of wild stuff where it comes to money, and it's just, yeah, like your future is tied to that person that might just be like a scammer or might abandon you completely or just
Or get mad at you and wanna screw you over.
or get mad at you, you know, because they do, because like
They do.
they're humans, right? They're not like angels that are out there like trying to grant you or like wishes or something, you know, like they're humans. So like sometimes they get mad at you, sometimes the personalities don't mesh, right? That's very normal. Like it's not always the agent, sometimes it's also the author.
Yeah, it's
Right?
two-way street often.
It's a
for
two-way
sure.
street.
Yeah.
So all of that is important. Like I think like especially, yeah, I don't know. Like at this is what I was talking about the pivoting, because if you're getting an offer, that means that there's something there. So I feel like you can't just have the mindset like this is one and done. You know, like definitely ask around. Like authors talk to like other people, right? So like there's whisper things going on, like that agent's or like, you know, like, and just listen, be a part of that, like trust your instincts and your gut, like really look through paperwork. Like that was important for me. Like when I read my contract, even though I had no idea what was going on, I was like, can someone else read this? Because listen, legal stuff and me, like I just write books, like I don't know. But the days was important. Because I was like, what if an agent really, you're just not getting along and they're trying to screw you and you have a bad working relationship and then you're stuck with them for 6 months and you can't sell another book to anyone else because you have to sell it through that agent, you know? So all of that is very important. Yeah.
Alright. I just wanna, like, I'm not gonna name names because this is not my story, but this is just a really good example of why it's important to vet your agents. I have a really good friend who I met after they had signed with their current agent, who they are trying desperately to leave right now. And if I had met them ahead of time, I would have warned them not to go with this agent because I have heard many stories and I've never met this agent, but I am chronically online enough to just be annoyed by their presence. Point is, this agent has taken 4 of my friend's books on sub out to editors, but minimally, to like maybe 2 editors. And because of industry norms, now that so now that she is trying to leave this agent, those books have already been exposed. She can't query with them. She has to write entirely new ones, even though she has these 4 books that she would love to sell. So you can just get into all sorts of sticky situations if you don't, do your homework. I was in the position when I got the offer from this small press that I had several fulls out with different agents, which weren't offers, but they were fulls. And I was just so excited to have this actual offer that I went with it instead of, checking in with those other agents and seeing what they knew. And I, if I had done my proper homework on this press, there were several red flags that I should have paid attention to.
But it's so hard when you get the yes.
It is so hard, especially when it's your debut, especially when it's not your first or when it is your first rodeo. But that said, there are several. I'm trying to remember which link it is. There are a couple links on here that. It's not Query Tracker, Absolute Right. Yeah, Absolute Right, I think, is the one that's a little bit more of like a collective, people piecing together information about different agents, reputations and things like that. And obviously take it with a grain of salt, do your own homework, but that should be a helpful resource.
And I just wanted to say I loved your vision of people doing this together, like people having to query, going in and having community. And we do have writing groups, and you can always propose one to us if you'd like to facilitate it. So I'm assuming this is a room full of people who may have manuscripts, and if any of you are interested in forming a group that could just share about the process, that would be something that we could absolutely host.
I do want to reiterate my warning, though, not about, having a group here. I think that's an excellent idea. But if you find yourself, especially in online spaces, especially with people who've been doing this for a while, just feel the vibes. When you have a job, you're at work and it's a new job and you really like it, or there's no reason not to like it, and then one person starts to complain and you start to notice all the things that you didn't before, and suddenly it's a job that you hate. I feel like it can turn into a similar situation.
Can I just add something real quick? I'm sorry, I know we're getting I just wanted to say, and this is probably gonna sound like a closing remark from me in case we can't say anything like this. I know everything we set up here might be overwhelming because a lot of it sounds like barrier, we're talking about barriers, right? So it literally sounds overwhelming. But I just want to say personally for me, this has been the best thing that I've ever done, right? Ever. Being creative and living my life and writing as a job is just so amazing. So that's, we're saying all this stuff and it might sound scary and overwhelming, and it might sound well, that sounds pretty impossible then. I have so many things to think about, but I just wanted to say that, push through, because the other side of it is so beautiful. Even when the other side has its own issues, its own separate set of issues. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much, and we will open it to your questions now.
Okay, so suppose you started a book in a trilogy. Do you send the original book or the original manuscript?
I'm so sorry, I have a really hard time
I'll-
hearing
I'll-
everyone.
Yeah, I can repeat the questions
Okay,
too.
thank you.
Okay, yeah, so if you have a book, I have a trilogy I'm working on, and I'm gonna self-publish that one, and if someone wants to pick it up, do you send them the original manuscript if they wanna see further, information on it, or just the original book if they haven't picked it up? I don't know how it works, so, I didn't.
Yeah, so the question is about a trilogy, and you're thinking of self-publishing, and you're wondering about do you send the whole manuscript out?
Well, for subsequent ones, if you self-publish the first one and it's doing well, and then you query and somebody's interested, so do you send?
Okay, so the first manuscript is published, and you're starting to get the second one out, and how do you approach this?
So the first question is always, how will my agent make money on me, right? That's what they care about, is making money on you. So when you self-publish, you have made money on you, and that's money that they won't make. And your publisher, an editor, will also see that. Now, you can look at an E.L. James and the 50 Shades situation, if we're talking big success, and there are actually imprints, Bloom is one at Sourcebooks, that take TikTok stars and people who have demonstrated a huge marketplace. But that's sort of, in my opinion, kind of a unicorn path. It's really unusual. So I would just say, it's really good to just pick what you want to do. So if you want to self-publish, do it, and be the CEO of your company, and learn marketing and targeting, and just go. If you want to traditionally publish, then you're not going to do that. You're going to focus on this stuff we're talking about here, but and the craft of it, and learning who's the best agent for you. It is just extremely hard to have a foot in both worlds.
Or you can have a foot in both worlds, but maybe not starting, unfortunately, like that. I think having something self-published or self-publishing in a different genre or in a different age group or something like that, but then also trying to traditionally publish another book. So my advice would be to try to write a different book, self-publish the series, and then try to write a different book to get an agent, if that makes sense. Because it is kind of a unicorn path, where some of them, Sarah J. Maas and so many people, Carissa Broadbent, a ton of authors now that we know, but not in the majority. So it's still unicorn, have published later by exposure to TikTok or having a fan base, or even Reddit groups. One of my friends has a huge, never did social media ever, just was on Reddit, and makes way more money than me, self-publishing, right? So it's a different way to go. I do think that you can do both, but I don't think you're gonna be able to do both with that book right now, unfortunately, currently, you know?
I agree with that 100%. I think that, and I know of people who've done this, who've started as self-published, and then moved into the traditionally published space. Again, not with those books, but, and this is true even if you stay in self-publishing or you start in TradPub, frontlist sells backlist. So let's say that, you know, your first book doesn't do super well in sales, but then your next one does, and then everyone goes back to see what you've done. There is a world, again, this is a bit of a unicorn, but there is always a world where you self-publish this trilogy, and then you start traditionally publishing, you have success there, and then people, you know, a traditional publisher wants to pick up that self-publish and repackage it.
Yeah.
But yeah, self-publishing the first in a series or a trilogy and then trying to transition in the middle of it is probably not gonna work.
And I think that's kind of just do more research. But like, if you were to publish this trilogy and say, I sold 5,000 copies, like that's not nothing. I mean, some books, that's the whole life of a traditionally published book, right? Like, there's ways in which that can really show that and demonstrate you have an audience and say, and you know, I have these sales record, and then now here's this new, I want to try the traditionally published path. Again, it's a pivot, right? That's great, but it's that mix that's hard.
And it is that record that's important, you know, it's
The reason that, you know, E.L. James or who else am I thinking of? Like Ollie Blake or actually S.T. Gibson, who was another local author, were able to make that transition is because of the explosive popularity of like these unicorn authors. They did self-publish, but it was explosively popular. Traditional publishers saw that, saw money signs, and said, "Yeah, we would like that. Thank you."
Mm-hmm.
So you know, it's the same mentality. It's the same thought process. You just kind of can't control it.
Thank you. Did we have another question over there?
Sure,
Yeah.
Vanessa. So you lost your publisher and your agent.
I left my agent. Yeah.
Okay. And then you got a new agent.
Yep.
And a new publisher.
Correct.
Did you feel that you were starting over again?
Yes, I did.
So did your approach in querying, did you cite your first two titles?
For sure, with
Okay.
sales numbers and marketing strategy and demonstrating that, you know, I was someone who had been in the business and very importantly, and I've told this to many of my other friends who have, and I don't know what it was about COVID, but man, post-COVID, I had more friends than not who left their agents. But my advice is always, when you're looking for that new agent, you're going out with a new book and you're saying, this is sort of like what I'm doing, but it's different, right? This is like, so for me, it was like this new series was, you know, along the lines of what I'd done before, but it was different for a personal reason too, which again, the personal thing is important. You're kind of repackaging yourself. And then again, all of the things I said to my agent, then she took that out when she was trying to sell it. Like it's a long, you know, lead, I guess, into that. So yeah, it did feel like starting over, but it was also good because I sort of had to start over and rethink how I was selling myself and what I was like in those relationships and things like that.
Do we have other questions? Oh yes, so many. I saw you in the back first.
So I see in your query, I'm speaking to Sophie. I see in your query letter that you mentioned the potential for a series. I'm writing a trilogy, and I know that the first book is going to end on a cliffhanger, and that, like, should we be saying that this is part of a trilogy, that it's going to end on a cliffhanger, that readers are going to want more? Should we be putting that in our query letter?
So
I did hear that.
I'm loud.
No. I think that, again, because you want the query letter to be as concise and punchy as possible, so as to get your meaning across but not take up too much of the agent's time. Series potential says all of that. So I had the exact same situation where my book ends, I won't say on a cliffhanger, but it's definitely not wrapped up neat and tidy. A good agent who wants your book, if they don't think that they could sell it as a trilogy, will work with you to revise it into a standalone. But you don't need to talk about that in your query letter.
I just wanted to add something that my agent said recently, so my agent was actually like, I was talking about going out with it. She was like, oh, it's scary it's the same thing with Hollywood. Like, it's scary for publishers to think that they have to commit to all of that. So it's like all about getting their attention. I just wanted to add on that, just because she just said that to me like a week ago or something. She was like, it's scary. We don't want to tell them that there's more books. We just want. So I think it's the same thing for Query. Like, you don't want to tell them. You just want them to read it and be like, this needs to have more books.
Yeah, be like, well,
you know?
of course you are gonna have this be a trilogy. How could it be anything else?
Yeah.
But you don't need to lead with that.
Lauren, I saw you had your hand up.
Yes. Hi. I've been mostly self-publishing for the last 5 years or so, and I'm starting to potentially dip my toe back into traditional, which is frightening, because I've been through it before, and it was very different even 5 years ago. I had a couple of questions, if that's okay. One of them was, I appreciate all the talk about, all the horror stories and red flags to look out in your agents, because that's so true. And certainly over the last 5 years, I've seen all these stories and thought, oh my gosh, like, how do you find somebody who's decent? I wanted to know from each of you, what do you like about your agent? Like, what do you think why are they such a good fit for you? And what's something to look out for? We mentioned a little bit like communication style, which I thought was so important.
Yeah.
And then sales, of course. But I also just wondered for you, like, what do you like about them? Why do you like working with them?
Yeah, I already said mine, so I already said mine. My agent, like, we have phone calls. Like, we don't have to do like Zoom meetings or anything. Like, we literally call each other, we text each other. Like, this is not like the normal thing, but it definitely is like very much appreciated. And she also doesn't have the same relationship. It's like she has a pivot, right? So she's able to pivot. Like, some of her clients she doesn't talk to at all for years. Like, it's like, whenever you get a book in, and it's not because of her, it's more because of the author. So I think, like, for me, it's like somebody that can like adjust, and I'm like, okay, we're going through a mess right now. Do you know how to pivot? Because I'm about to pivot. So I'm telling you right now that I need to go write a thriller because this romance thing is not working out. Are we good? And the agent is like, we're good, do whatever. So that's my agent's, I love her. Look, if she listens to this, I love you, Jess. And also, when she's querying again, Jess Regal from Helm Literary, she's a rock star. I love her.
I think my favorite qualities in an agent are they get back to you very quickly on email, because I have a lot of anxiety, and that is not a quality all agents have. And so some of the advice is like, know thyself. And I also feel like when we're on calls with my editor or the marketing team, she'll sort of ask questions that push them in a polite way. Like, she knows kind of what's supposed to be going on, which again gets back to sales and then being in the mix of the spaces and the genres that matter to you. She's sort of like, well, can we do 50 giveaway copies in the Goodreads giveaway? Stuff like that just show that she's kind of in the mix and knows. And she's like, well, if this is the pub date, will that give us enough time to submit to book of the month? Or like stuff that they need to know as an agent because they're in the mix and they're selling and they're on lots of these calls, like things like that mean a lot. And just as a person, she's very kind and like a good listener. I had one like really hard phone call and she like called me right after to be like, are you okay? Go kick your feet up and have a bubble bath or whatever. Like, there's a sort of human element to it that is, everyone's gonna be really nice when they're offering. And so talking to their other clients, they will suggest, you should say, like, who of your clients can I talk to? And they will suggest to you a couple people, but those are gonna be their like A+ students. So you can even, look and see who's on their list and just say, oh, just so you can maybe privately reach out to them, depending on how much due diligence you wanna do, DM them or something and say, hey, I'm talking to this agent, I see they've sold some books for you, do you mind just email you a couple questions or something. But you can do that too if you're like really trying to think about it. I mean, usually I feel like if I get a call, if I take one of those calls from my agent and it's like it's someone who might be her like future client, I'm usually pretty honest about things. I love her and I think she's great, but like I have some things like if you don't like this, she might not be the right fit for you. So you probably will have those conversations naturally, but I do think it's good to just think about what you like as a person and what will decrease your anxiety and the things that you really need, as well as I will just say it again, just to the books that are similar to your books. That really, really matters.
Yeah, the communication is everything, and it's not just that my agent does communicate. It's the way in which she communicates because of conversations we've had about what I need. So I was very clear with her from the very beginning that I'm the kind of person who spirals if I don't have information, even if it feels like excessive or the nitty gritty. Just tell me what's going on, and that will keep me from doom spiraling and deciding the worst, especially because there's a lot of hurry up and wait in this industry. And she's been fabulous about that. She's been fantastic about, making sure that I'm just completely informed about the way things are going, what's happening. We also have been through a lot together because even before before I lost my first deal, she switched agencies, and my deal was tied to the previous agency. So I felt like I was being left with a babysitter. Because she was like, we can continue to work together, just not on these books. And then that deal fell through. And we continued to, have great communication throughout that. And then there was another incident after I had my very shortly after I had my new project, where she left her agency again, but different circumstances, and not in I'm trying to be very vague about this. It wasn't a good circumstance. It wasn't really her choice. It was a good thing ultimately, but the way that agency handled things was so bad that they let me leave with her, which is not normal. But through that whole thing, there was so much good communication and level-headedness, and because we've been through so much that every time she texts me now and says hey, can we talk? It's nothing bad. She's like, this is not like a bad conversation, which is great because I'm very nervous as a general, state of being. But the other thing that I really love about her, aside from the communication, we also text. Sometimes if I, want something to feel a little bit more official, I'll send her an email instead. But usually it's just texting. But the thing that I think was so important, aside from the fact that she's a grounded, level-headed person who talks me through her processes, and who I trust, is that she really believes in the things that I write. She really gets them. And that's so important because she's the one who's going to be selling them. She understood what I was getting at. It's not even about the editing, which she does do some editing, but also she knew exactly what editors to send this to. And she kind of did a similar thing with that I was suggesting people do with querying, where you do rounds of it, so that if there were passes, we could address whatever issues there were. And she knew so specifically what this was that we heard nothing for 4 months from anyone. It was very weird, and then within 1 week we got 3 offers. And they were all such good fits, but one of them specifically was someone I really, really admired. She was the, has anyone read This Is How You Lose the Time War?
Yes.
That's my editor. And she won a Hugo for that. And the conversation that we had, it was just such a perfect match, but my agent is the one who match made that because she really understood what I was doing. So, that's important.
And we had a couple questions over here, if you still, yeah.
This kind of relates to querying. How often have you all hired a developmental editor or a copy editor between your queries?
I did not.
I was broke as hell, so I couldn't do any of that stuff. I would suggest that if you can't do any of that stuff, just literally make connections and get beta readers, get readers in your community that will just read your book for you, mark things. I think Google Docs is such a good way to do this, right? Because you could just see the notes right at the side. People could just write comments in, and you can just kind of go through them. But yeah, I do know people that have hired, but none of us, I guess, have.
No, I did.
Oh, you did.
Oh,
You did.
for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. I had and it's so expensive. I mean, it was I think when I did it was in actually, the way I learn is I really have to see, the mistakes pointed out to me, and like, there was something I was missing in my manuscript, and I needed someone to go in and not only redline it, but just like explain to me what wasn't working and why. And a developmental editor, I actually have hired them twice, 2 different ones, like really just help some things click that you know, when you can just feel that it's not there, but you don't know what it is. And like I had betas and critique partners, but I felt like I'd gotten to a point where I'd asked everyone I know to read it, and then I didn't want to ask them again, because it is a huge burden. And 2, I just knew there were things like that they know, especially because many of the developmental editors, like they were editors at, you know, Penguin or whatever, and now they're working from home, and you know, like that's common. Both of mine have worked at publishers, so they really read a lot and knew a lot, and I just needed to go there. Now it's super expensive and it's a really big commitment, but that's how I really feel like I leveled up a little bit, because I could go into this document and really see, and also like based on whatever the package was, I think I had like at least 3 or 4 phone calls to like walk through everything. I could send them pages as part of the process. So it was a huge help to me. And right now I'm actually trying to learn how to do screenwriting in a more effective way. And so like tomorrow, I'm getting on a train and I'm going to meet with a person who's like a screenwriter and who I'm paying. And she's going through my screenplay, because I want the same experience, because just for me, I don't want to keep asking my friends to read my screenplay. I feel like that's torture for my friends. But B, it's like, I just want to hire a professional, even though it's expensive, because like that's how I learn, and I can feel myself hitting like a wall of capability, if that makes sense. So yeah, I do it a lot.
I didn't do it because I was also broke as hell, but I think if I had that kind of money, it would have been a really valuable investment.
Oh yeah, it sounds like amazing.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Like I'm like, could I afford it with my next book? Because
Yeah, I was living on those COVID like unemployment checks.
I have a lot of published friends who
They hire developmental editors before they send it to their editor. I mean, it's they really can help figure things out with you that unfortunately editors don't always have time for.
I could have used that in my last book, I'll tell you that.
So let's wrap it up with one more question.
Have any of you run into roadblocks or obstacles if the next book you write is a very much genre shift from what you have written last with your agent, and what's best practice for that?
So what's the best practice if you're switching genre after having started?
Some people, like, communication's good, so, you know, letting the agent know, like, I used to write romance and now I want to write a thriller. Like, if they've never sold a thriller and they don't have those relationships, that might be harder for them. So I think just honesty and transparency, but don't also shy away. I mean, I think it's exciting. I think pivots can really work for people. You know, I would never let my agent's abilities hinder me from moving forward with the project. But definitely the kind of open communication, and hopefully you have an agent who would be like, listen, I don't know how to sell this. My colleague sells thrillers all day long. They can help. So, I mean, they can be like that sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. I'm trying to write an epic fantasy, and I feel like I've been all over the place, and my agent she doesn't even read epic fantasy. So this is separate, because she's amazing. I can't think of her enough. She's reading a couple of them so that she could know what she's talking about when she reads my book, which is really sweet. But I will say, like, she said to me, if you want to write this, like, I will find a way to make it happen, even if it's not me. Like, we will, like, you do what's calling to you. So I wouldn't let it hinder you either. Like, if you want to shift and you want to pivot and you want to write in a different genre, then the communication, I think, is the most important. Like, whenever I'm thinking about, like, pivoting, I'm not gonna go and just, like, write an entire manuscript. Oh, unless you can put it away. If you have something else. A Love Like the Sun was something I wrote and I put it away, and I wrote it during NaNoWriMo, and I was supposed to be writing the second book in my young adult contract, and then I put it away because I wasn't supposed to be writing this book. And then I told her about it later. I was like, hey, I kind of have a romance, and she was like, oh, okay. But But I agree. Now, when I tell her about pivoting, I always like talk to her first. I'm like, hey, knock knock, and she still says like, just get me the book, like you know. But like, I think communication is important.
And I just want to plug that our books are for sale over there, and it's supporting the most incredible local bookstore. And there is no better gift on earth than a personalized signed book. And you've got romance. Give me your genre.
No.
Isn't that the question? Yeah.
Speculative fiction.
Chicklet, no, it's speculative fiction. It's alternate history.
Alternate history, thrillers, of everything.
Also, Heartleaf Books is Rhode Island's only queer-owned independent bookstore. And we have a very cute manager. Her name is Penny. She's a cat.
Oh yeah. My favorite book.
Before we wrap up, I just wanted to, what did I want to add to that? Oh, yeah, so I mentioned before that I had written this other project that I finally revealed to my agent last year, and she said, no. And then changed her tune a year later. And a big part of that was because she, like the market had shifted, but she had also just met like 3 editors who she thought would be perfect for it. So she suddenly knew who she would want to sell it to and why. So that was helpful, not anything I could control, but helpful. But on the flip side, I was joking with her about a children's book that I wanted to write, which I've never thought about writing a children's book before in my life, but I actually think this would be really great. And I have like a very small niece and nephew now, so I kind of want to do that, but it was totally a joke. And she said, yeah, if you write the text, I don't know anything about the market, but I'll talk to X other agent at the agency and figure out how to do this, because that sounds great. So, you know, I think that is something that a lot of people don't realize until they're, you know, working, is how much this business is based on relationships, whether it's between agents at agencies or an agent and an editor. It is a very relationship-based industry, and that can really shift how things work.
All right, we want to thank you all so much for coming.